Chapter 1, Puppy Love. There's a saying that says cats have 9 lives, and so do I. Well, I consider myself just as lucky. I want to share some stories that you might find hard to believe. This is not science fiction. This is the story of how I lived my life for 50 years, but on my terms. It is about how I cut corners because I thought it would make things easier, and how I was always swimming upstream against the current to find land, without much results. I was born in Mexico in 1953. My mother, father, and older sister Rosie and I came to the United States when I was 2 years old and Rosie was 3. None of us knew more than 3 or 4 words of English. In the first grade, I spoke half English and half Spanish. You can't imagine the communication problems that I had in school. When I was in the 5th grade at Hobart Boulevard School in West Los Angeles, my sister Rosie told me that one day a teacher was yelling at the top of her lungs in the hallway at someone for the entire corridor to hear. And get that grin off your face. Later, as we talked about this, I told my sister the teacher was yelling at me, but I really didn't understand why. I was grinning not because I was happy, but because I was scared, nervous, and embarrassed. I told Rosie I didn't understand clearly what the teacher expected of me. This situation and others like it did not help my self-esteem. In my home, only Spanish was spoken. At school, only English was spoken. The language issue really set me apart from the other students. As time went by, I flunked the 3rd grade. In 1968, I was attending Mark Keppel High School in Alhambra. My being bilingual didn't help, and I started getting into trouble by ditching. School started to get harder, so I began to just give up and I stopped trying. I started clowning around to cover up how stupid I thought I was and how inferior I felt. I didn't fit in, so most of the time I stayed home. I watched TV and I spent a lot of time playing baseball or football. My father and I were the closest when I played baseball. He volunteered to be my coach. My dad was very strict, a perfectionist, critical, and impatient. He frequently yelled and scolded me, which showed his disapproval and disappointment. After the games, he usually lectured me about everything I did wrong. The compliments were few and short. It was his way of teaching me, but it contributed to my feelings of low self-esteem. I started playing in the Major League Baseball. I played in the Pony League for 2 years, then Babe Ruth, then AAA, which were other baseball leagues. The AAA was the last step before you could be considered for recruitment to play in the big league. It was my father's dream for me to play professional baseball, not mine. He told me he had wished he could have been a professional baseball player himself. He shared that when he was young, he would play with a homemade baseball made out of pressed newspaper in the streets with his friends. Hard baseballs were very expensive, so he could never afford one. He said I was a very good second baseman. I liked playing baseball. I was about 15 and a half by then, and that is the time when a young man loses focus if he doesn't put his priorities in order. I started hanging out with guys on the street. 3 of them were members of a gang called the Animal Tribe. One of the guys was called Crazy Larry. He was 7 feet tall with long hair. He was built like an Indian warrior. Then there was Happy, whom I knew from when I was younger when I lived in West Los Angeles. There was also Casper. He and his little brother lived alone without parental supervision at their parents' home on my street. His parents owned and operated a bar in East Los Angeles where they lived, so Casper's house became the headquarters for the Animal Tribe gang, which was a powerful gang that later I became a member of. The neighbors learned to live in fear and stay out of our business. My family and I lived on a very long street. It was about 3/4 of a mile long. We had tribe parties regularly, and we would shoot bullets from our guns up into the air, just like in the Old West days. It was at age 17 that I was initiated into the Animal Tribe. There were about 36 members in the tribe at that time. Several of them ganged up against me and beat me up for 3 minutes. Those were the longest 3 minutes of my life. I really think it was longer than 3 minutes because no one had a watch. Afterward, I felt like I belonged. I felt big and bad like all the other members. It made me feel like I had power and the tribe was my own army. They became my extended family. They would be the ones to help me out in case things went wrong outside of my own biological family. My parents continued to give me love. They tried to keep me on the straight and narrow path. After school, I went to baseball practice or to play a ball game. It was about that time in my life when I started drinking alcohol. I drank before I went to school at 7 a.m., before a game, and after school. I ended up dropping out of school. I was placed on probation and given mandatory group counseling. My sister Rosie was in charge of taking me to my counseling appointments, which were scheduled once a week. She would drop me off at the front door and pick me up 1 hour later. What she didn't know was that I would go into the office and sneak out the back door and wait outside until the hour was over. Eventually, they found out what I was doing, and my plan to avoid facing my problems was ruined. I hated those group counseling sessions. I hated to talk. I wasn't the kind of person that could express my feelings or my troubles. I just closed up because I didn't understand how it could have helped me. I was very defiant against authority and those that were trying to help me. Then one day, I fell in love with a girl named Cassie. When I was with her, I had warm feelings inside. There were all kinds of butterflies in my stomach. It was like going to bat when the bases were loaded. There were 2 outs and the score was even. This became a very important part of my life. I made a left turn in life instead of going right. I lost my direction and became all jacked up, irrational and confused. Cassie went to Shore High School in Montebello. I did not see much of her during the week, only on weekends. We went to the movies or school football games. She was 15 and a half and also a virgin, as I came to find out later. To me, this was very important. I thought that Cassie was going to be the woman with whom I was going to spend the rest of my life. During the 5 years that we were together, this woman was my lover and the love of my life. I gave this woman all of my love. I learned that when you first love, you love happily. In the 4th year of our relationship, I found out that during the week she was seeing another man, and on the weekend she was with me. Chances were that we were not going to make it. My first thought was to step up the romance and show this chum, someone I did not like, how to treat a young woman. Ha ha ha. It backfired on me. I came to find out that she had been seeing this guy for 2.5 years. I heard from another gang in East Los Angeles that he was a new member of the East Los Angeles Car Club. I knew most of the members, so I started asking questions. When it all came out, I asked if I could talk to him face to face. I was told that he agreed to talk with me. However, 2 or 3 weeks went by without any word from him. I got tired of waiting for him to show up and talk it out man to man. I wanted to do things right. I didn't want to get this guy pissed off, but I was mad that I was stood up. I started to lose control. This guy was not man enough to face me face to face. One day, he sent some friends to back him up. As I was walking, I heard someone behind me. When I turned around, they were about 8 of his homies. I told the guys, "Tell this puto, bastard, that he is not a man and that sooner or later I will find him. I can't believe that he would stand me up. I'm going to get that guy." With that, I started to walk away because I didn't want to say something that I would later regret. I did not pay much attention to them. All I wanted was to get into my 66 Chevy Super Sport and get the hell out of there. I didn't want to talk about the situation further. I wasn't going to give up, and I wanted Cassie to know that she was the most important person in my life and in my future. I had asked Cassie to marry me, and she said, "Yes, we will someday." We had talked about it a lot, but this time she knew I was talking about soon, very soon. I was still about 17 years old and still in school when I took her to see engagement and wedding rings. She fell in love with a really nice set. The set of rings came to a total of $800 plus tax. I worked to earn this money as a dishwasher at a popular local dinner entertainment restaurant until midnight during the week and weekends. My parents and sister would take turns dropping me off and picking me up. If I didn't love this woman, I wouldn't have gone all the way out to show her how much I cared. 2 months later, I found out that she was pregnant. I was still in denial that she could be involved with someone other than me. I didn't even consider the possibility that the baby wasn't mine. She was 6 months pregnant with the baby when I received a call from her and she had a miscarriage. I asked where she was so I could take her some flowers and see how she was doing. She said, "It's late and the visiting hours are over. I'll call you tomorrow." She never called. It took me 2 months to find out that she moved out of her parents' home into her own place. I sat out in front of her parents' home for a week until she came back. One day she finally came. A half hour later she came out and I followed her up to an apartment on the west side and I lost sight of her. It wasn't going to be hard to find out what the number of the apartment was where she lived. One cold and rainy night in December 1972, I decided to pay her a visit. It was raining off and on. The drops poured down hard, and the chilly wind burned my bare face. I was wearing a large rimmed hat made out of bamboo and a long black trench coat with black boots. I parked down the street where it was dark so I wouldn't be noticed. I wanted to get my rings back and my stereo, which she had kept. Mostly, I just wanted to confront her. She had really hurt me when she rejected my love, and I wanted to try one more time to work things out with her. I went through all the mailboxes and found letters addressed to her in an apartment on the second floor. I walked up the stairs, and the door was open. I could hear some faint whispering and giggling. I tried the screen door, and it was not locked. The first thing I saw was my stereo, so I knew I had the right place. My blood started to rise, and my heart was pumping very fast. I looked at the chump that was living there with her, and I said to myself, no wonder this fool's been hiding from me. Casually, I said, I'm here to get my things. Are you going to stop me? He said, no. I walked to the bedroom door, and there she was with her pants almost to her knees. They both looked at me. My ex-girlfriend was yelling at me to get out of her house before she called the police. She was reaching for the phone and trying to pick up her pants at the same time. I picked up my stereo and headed out, down the street and toward my car. Within a few moments, a black and white pulled up. They drew their guns and pointed them at me. The officer said that for my protection and theirs, they were not taking any chances, and they were forced to handcuff me. Then they put me in the back of their police car. After they had spoken to Cassie and her boyfriend, one officer approached me. He said, you're lucky. I'm going to give you a break. I'm not going to take you in. But I could on 3 different felony charges: burglary, trespassing, breaking and entering. He looked straight into my eyes and continued, if I see you around here again, I'm going to take you to jail. I exclaimed, she has my engagement and wedding ring worth over $800 and I want them back. He said, consider it a gift to her and get the F out of here before I change my mind. All along I thought I was doing things the right way. I had big dreams. I wanted to marry Cassie and live happily ever after. We had looked at an apartment overlooking East Los Angeles College so we could have our own place. I had been so excited about starting our new life together. Now all that had vanished. That night, I went home to my room in the back of the house where I would stay when I was at my parents' house. I was hoping someone was home, but the house was dark. I thought I would spend the night there. I was trying to sleep, but I was in a very bad shape emotionally. I was thinking about my next move. I just couldn't let this bitch get away with my $800. She had played me, deceived me for 5 years. She played me and she used me, and that will be the first and last time I will ever get played or used. Or I thought so. As I sat there praying and crying, I thought about killing her boyfriend, killing her, or even both. The pain was unbearable, and I even thought about suicide. I was in deep thought for about 4 hours. I was tired of praying and thinking of the other things that I was going to do. Praying is what I thought would work best. I was crying and praying, and all of a sudden I started to ramble out loud without saying a word that made sense. Looking back on this, I believe I must have been baptized by the Holy Spirit and was given the spiritual gift of praying in tongues. For a moment, I realized what I was doing, and I started to say the Our Father and the Hail Mary. And then again, I started to ramble on in a foreign tongue. This time I did not stop because I felt I was communicating with God in a very special way that I had never done before, and it made me feel warm inside. After that, I never had that same miraculous experience again. Not much later, I heard that Cassie had sold my rings to pay her rent. I also found out that she had had an abortion, not a miscarriage, which was illegal at the time. She never told me, but my gut feeling told me that she didn't know who the father was of this baby, so she went and decided to get rid of it. I am no longer in denial. I learned a big lesson in life, which is not to give 110% in a relationship. 100% is good enough. You have to leave that extra 10% for insurance, just in case something like this happens. Then you have a little extra strength left in you, which you can use to bounce back. The lesson I learned is that the first love is the hardest to forget and to give up. It took me 2 years to get out of this depressed state of mind. It took me 3 years before I stopped dreaming about my broken romance that was never going to be. Soon there was another major loss in my life. Alex, his siblings, and his mother had been our next-door neighbors for years. When it was time for Alex to make his first Holy Communion, his mother asked me if I would be a godfather for Alex. For me, this was a great honor, and I took the responsibility very seriously. When Alex was very young, his father had abandoned his family, which left Alex without guidance of his father. When Alex was about 14 years old, he started to get involved with drugs and the wrong crowd. He had become involved with some drug dealers who had threatened to hurt or kill his family if he didn't pay them some money he owed them, which he did not have. Instead of coming to me with this problem or getting other adults involved, he panicked, and he couldn't see a way out of his problem. So he hung himself with a rope in the patio of his backyard. He left a suicide note saying that this was his only way out. I was not aware of all of this at the time. I thought he and I were close, and I felt guilty and wish I would have been there for him. But I was involved in my own stuff. This was very sad and depressing for me. This was the first of many funerals I would be attending. The death of Alex was another great loss in my young life. I was about 18 years old at this time. They say when you lose someone by death, illness, or accident, you have to work through the grief and pain. I never did. I just buried the feelings deep inside of me.